This pasha is related to the great event of Kriyas Yamsuf. And the Torah tells us the various steps that occurred, that brought about this situation of Kriyas Yamsuf. Eden left Mitzrayim into the desert, and then Hashem tells Moshe to reroute, turn them around, and start walking back towards Mitzrayim. And also, this will be closer to the Yamsuf. And Parei will interpret that Eden got lost in the desert. They don't know what they are doing. And this will convince Parei that he should go and chase Eden and bring him back into Mitzrayim. In other words, this entire event was planned by Hashem. And as a result of that, what happened was that Parei, in fact, decided to chase after the Eden. And he caught up with them by the Yamsuf. And here, Eden were sandwiched between Parei and the Yamsuf. And again, all of this was actually planned exactly by Hashem, and then this is how it should happen. At that time, at that moment, when Eden turned around and saw Parei chasing them, they were at a loss what to do. They started giving all kinds of ideas of what they should do under the circumstance. And the Medrash says that there were 4 different groups formed in that time, each one with their own idea as to what should be done under this moment. One group came back and said, Parei is chasing us. There is no way that we can get out of this. Parei is more powerful than we are. And therefore, let us give up and let us go back to Mitzrayim. Allow Parei to capture us as slaves. Another group said, under no circumstances are we going to become slaves to Parei again. If we cannot secure ourselves against Parei, I'd rather jump into the sea and drown than to be a slave by Parei. This was another group. They said, we let us jump into the sea, just to avoid having to go back and be slaves of Parei. So there are 2 groups. Then there was another group that said, let us wage war against them. Wage war was also a kind of a very drastic idea, because Parei, they were trained soldiers with all kinds of weaponry, all kinds of power, and Eden were not equipped to challenge such an army. But they said, if we are defeated, we are defeated at least in war. We're not going to be just defeated without resistance. Let us wage war on Parei. Maybe we'll win. Then there was a fourth group that said that there is nothing we can do in this situation. We're not going to go back to Pari, we're not going to jump into the sea, we can't fight them. All we can do is pray to Hashem. So they started praying to Hashem. Now, each one of these groups was actually presenting a reasonable or logical proposition. Since they are in this squeeze situation, each one of these ideas, alternatives, had a reasonable basis for the suggestion. Certainly, the one that said, "Let us pray to Hashem." After all, Hashem can do miracles, and Hashem will pray to Hashem. Hashem should save us. And therefore, it would seem that they were all, so to speak, in line, all thinking along the lines that a Yid is supposed to think. And yet, Hashem told Moshe that all four of these groups are making a very fundamental mistake. And all you have to do is tell them to continue in their journey as if nothing is happening. Continue going to the Yam Suf as if nothing is happening. And Hashem then told Moshe that in fact what's going to happen is that the sea is going to split, and he's not going to be able to go through the sea, pass through the sea, and the Mitzrim are going to drown.
Can Moshe tell Bnei Yisrael that or not? That Hashem is going to split the sea, because then maybe that would have stopped a lot of confusion.
Moshe did tell him.
But they didn't believe someone?
No, it's not a question of believing. It's after all that they were told everything, it was only one Nachshon and Aminodov who had this daring to go and jump into the sea. And that's when it split. We'll discuss the whole phenomenon a little bit. So the point that we want to understand and focus on is like this. Hashem tells Moshe, tell Eden, you're all wrong, essentially. This is what you should do. The truth is, Eden could not possibly have thought of the idea that the sea is going to split before them. And therefore, their ideas were not wrong. Their ideas were really in line of the possibility of the possible. How are they wrong, so to speak? Not have shown that they were accused or anything, but they were told, no, you were thinking along the wrong lines. What was wrong with their thinking?
Was lack of biblical or?
You're trying to second guess? What?
Yeah, I'm trying to ask. I'm asking, I don't know, who was it?
I don't know. I'm going to try to explain. So, it's true that the actual solution of splitting the sea, okay, this was a wonderful thing for all times, forever, but this is not something that Eden could have possibly predicted, because you think of it, and to say that they should have thought differently than they did. There is a subtle message in this.
Subtle?
Subtle. an underlying, a hidden, a very fine message, subtle, that's something that you don't see very clearly. If you pay attention to the finer ideas, then you see that there exists a message. Essentially, what was happening over here? Eden came out of Mitzrayim, and they went in the desert. They went in the desert because Moshe told them, go, follow me. And he said, whatever you tell us, we go, we do. However, you go into the desert is not a place to live in. The desert is not a place that has resources to live on. What are you going to drink? What are you going to eat? And yet, they didn't have any question. Moshe tells them to go, they go. As a matter of fact, even more than that, because Moshe originally told them, just like Hashem told Moshe, that what is the end purpose, the end result of Eden coming out of Mitzrayim is not just that they're going to be free of the Egyptians, but in Mitzrayim and that whole experience of 200 years of servitude has prepared them to become really Oivdei Hashem, to receive the Torah and to create this new nation. This is the big purpose. There's a whole purpose in accomplishing here. This is not just to get rid of the Egyptians. There's a path here. There's a path here. So Eden followed Moshe into the desert. They knew that the desert has no provisions. And this great trust that Eden had at the time when they stepped out of Mitzrayim into the desert, men, women, and children, this is maintained, is kept for all times as one of the great merits, zechusim for the Jewish people. They even mentioned it in davening Rosh Hashanah. Every Rosh Hashanah we mentioned this great accomplishment that Eden had, and great trust that they had in the Medrash to go into the desert. So at that moment, when they left Mitzrayim into the desert, without calculating as to how they're going to survive, how they're going to the desert, they had a recognition that even though naturally the desert is not a place where people can live, but if Moshe tells them to go by the direction of God, that means that they are not limited to the natural resources. They don't know how it's going to be. They don't know how it's going to happen. But they're not limited to the resources available on natural level. They don't even question. They didn't ask Moshe how it's going to be, how we're going to survive. Because since that their understanding is only within the limits of natural world, so therefore that which is not obvious in the natural world, they don't know, they don't understand. So they didn't question. They went according to Moshe. Whatever happened, they don't question. In other words, at that moment, when they left Mitzrayim, they actually had an actual perception that there is something greater than that which meets the eye. And what meets the eye, that which you can see and makes sense of it. They're going to survive, and they didn't even consider how they're going to survive. This is completely in God's hands. It's a godly thing. And God is completely unlimited, unrestrained by natural constraints. Limited. Then they went out into the desert. And by direction from Moshe, from Hashem, from Moshe, they went back towards Mitzrayim. Again, when they were turning back towards Mitzrayim, Rashi brings down, you learned the Rashi, where Eden should have asked Moshe, what are you doing? Where are you leading us? You're taking us back to Mitzrayim. It's dangerous. We're supposed to go away from them. They didn't question. They didn't question. If Moshe says, we go. How are we going to survive? How is it going to happen? We don't know. We don't care. We are, so to speak, relying on different powers that are completely unlimited to what we understand. Now that they were actually squeezed between the sea and the Mitzrayim, all of a sudden they started thinking, how it's going to be? What's going to be with us? How are we going to survive? And they started giving all kind of ideas, all kind of suggestions, what we should do. What happened before when you left Mitzrayim? And what happened when you turned back towards Mitzrayim? Why at that time you didn't have any questions, now you have questions? This is a major point of instruction. That we can understand and recognize things way beyond our normal recognition. As long as we are not really squeezed, as long as we are not really in a situation that requires an answer. When we come in a situation where we actually squeeze between Pare and the sea, then we begin to think, hey, things have to make sense. How is it going to work out? In other words, the minute we know that there must be something, must be done, we immediately fall back on looking on solutions that are entirely, so to speak, within the natural world. Things that we can make sense of. All of a sudden, we lose our strength, we lose our perspective, and our recognition of what is actually happening. What did Hashem say to Moshe? Hashem said to Moshe, nothing has changed. I told them to go, and I took them out of Mitzrayim, and to go towards Matan Torah, towards Mahasina and Matan Torah. Just as when they went out from Mitzrayim into the desert, there were no provisions, and they just followed because you told them to follow, and whatever. There was not even a question how we're going to survive. We do what we are told to do. The same thing now. Tell Yidden v'yisor, Daber b'nei Yisor v'yisor. Let them continue on their journey. Let them not even be concerned as to how this is going to materialize, how this is going to work out. Things that they are following in Hashem, under Hashem's direction, and they are on the path towards Matan Torah. Their task is to follow the direction and not even be concerned how this can possibly work out. In other words, it isn't the ideas themselves that they produced. One of them was to pray to Hashem. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not a question of the ideas that were produced. The question is, you start looking for solutions to the situation from within the resources that are available to you. But this is not the situation right now. The situation that you're going towards a higher goal, and you have absolutely no idea how to achieve this goal. This is not in your hand. The Abba Paltiel Tiferes tell Eden they should continue on their journey. And Rashi says, because Ein Hayam Oimed Legnegdom, because the Yam is not going to stand, not going to prevent their movement. When they approach the Yam is going to split, and they're going to go right through, and so forth. What is the actual message over here? This Indian that the Yam is going to split, this is a total novel thing. Nobody could have predicted it. What is the tone? What is the implication? The overall implication is, this I will discuss on many levels. The overall message in this is that under the circumstances, even are going to Matan Torah, in Matan Torah, as you will learn in Mitzvah Shem, there was a complete change over from the world as it was to a completely new state in the world. Before Matan Torah, also there were many people, certainly Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and the Jewish people knew about Hashem. And when Yaakov Avinu was in danger, what did he do? He prayed to Hashem. And he relied on some kind of intervention that maybe should save him, should help him. This existed throughout the time, all the way, even in Mitzrayim, it says, Vayitzak b'nei Yisrael Hashem, even they screamed to Hashem when they were squeezing their work. Matan Torah brought the world to a new stage. To understand this new stage, prior to Matan Torah, the world was a world, and basically the world functioned along existing natural parameters, natural limits. Sometimes the Rebbe decided to make a nest, and it was a breakthrough in the natural limits. Like Eden came out of Mitzrayim, made a nest, made matches, and so forth. The nest was just like in Mitzrayim. Hashem brought a nest and brought matches and plagues on Egypt, but the nest did not change the world over. The world remained the same. There was a change, there was an intervention from Hashem that he made things run differently than would be expected in a natural course of things. And as a result of that, Eden were saved, various things happened. But this did not did not represent, did not make a change in the world. The world was still basically a natural world, running according to the rules of nature. Yes?
Nest or nest?
I'm sorry?
Did you say nest or nest?
I can't hear.
Nest or nest.
Or nest?
A nace.
Miracle.
Miracle.
Oh, miracle. Okay. Singular.
Nace. Nace is a miracle in Hebrew. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Rabbi, could I ask a quick question? When the world changed at Matan Torah, was it on a higher standard? higher, like more of Hashem's light within the world after.
Excuse me. I'm just coming to explain. So that, as I said, the primary, the basic state, the basic existence of the world has not changed throughout all these miracles, throughout all of these nisim. Matan Torah represented a complete break without a complete changeover. We'll come to Matan Torah Mitzvah, you'll learn. And essentially, in brief, what this represented is a state contrary to prior to Matan Torah, where the basic state of the world is natural, and sometimes there is a higher intervention. Matan Torah redefined the world, that no, the basic state of the world, that this is God's world. The world is based on a godly presence. And it runs according to the Torah, according to the way Hashem wants it to run. Torah, the Gemara says, the Torah is the initial plan of the world. This is what created the world. Like the Alter Rebbe explains, that the Maimah, the words of the Torah that are mentioned in Torah, Hashem created. Hashem said, let there be light. Hashem said, let there be, that the earth should produce and the water should split. This is the actual force that creates the world. In other words, Torah brought down into the world the actual force that creates the world. Not accepting the world for an existing, for what it is, and then you work within its parameters, within its limits. You bring down into the world the koyach, the essence that actually makes it be in the first place. This essence that makes it be in the first place, this is what's called the hidden aspect of the world. You may have heard this expression. There is what's called Alma di Iskasio and Alma di Isgalio. Alma di Isgalio means the revealed world, and Alma di Iskasio means the hidden world, the concealed world. In brief, to understand these concepts, in a human being there are also koiches, so to speak, there are powers, forces in the person that are revealed, such as thought, speech, and deed. That this is how a person expresses himself. And then there is also the conscious seichel, the logic that the person follows and understands. All that is on the revealed level. But then there is a neshama in the person that we have no access to. We don't understand what the neshama is. We don't understand there are influences directly from the neshama in a manner that we have absolutely no understanding of. The neshama gives us life itself, and life itself we do not begin to understand what it is. Even though we experience it all the time, we live all the time, but we have no idea what it is. What do we know about life? We know its manifestation, how it affects us. And because we are alive, and what shows, what exposes, what becomes obvious, but not the essence what it is. We don't have no understanding what it is. I always point out this simple illustration that we perceive, we think of us, of our bodies, our life. But the truth is that the body does not live of its own. The body lives because there is a neshama. What the neshama is, we have no idea. And the experience that we have, when a person, if you get a cut on your finger, the cut on your finger means that the body has been damaged. There's an actual cut. It's not easy. It's no different. Yeah. Soll der reinkommen, ja. Weil sollen wir nicht das? Nein. That's an English one? Huh? Yeah, come sit down, please. I'll try to include them. What's the difference between if you have a cut in your finger or if you have a cut in the snap?
This is more painful.
Genius.
Take another one.
Come on, don't waste these beautiful napkins. What is the difference? Huh?
So it's hurting tissue.
Uh-huh. But the tissue, we don't care if you hurt the tissue, right?
Not the same way.
Why not?
It's like you explained last week. You explained if you cut yourself, then the soul can fix it. The tissue.
There's no way. You can throw all the glue in the world on this. It's never going to be restored back to the way it was. Nothing. And the finger, after it's cut, miraculously, you put a Band-Aid on. The Band-Aid doesn't do anything. Band-Aid only keeps it clean from infection. That's all. It doesn't heal anything. And a few days later, you take the Band-Aid off and you start looking, where is my cut? No idea where it was. What happened? So we say, we are used to it. We say, oh, it healed. But what actually took place? How did it heal? Okay, you're welcome. We welcome you to come and join us. We're in the middle of discussion, and we'll try to count you in slowly. So again, coming back, when the tissue is cut, the tissue does not have a soul behind it that keeps it alive. All it is just the body of the tissue. So when once it's cut, there's absolutely no way that it can be restored to the state that it was before the cut. You can put tape on it, you can put glue on it, but it's just going to be a torn tissue with a little fix. Whereas when you have a cut on your finger, if you keep it clean from infection, a few days later, it disappears, it heals as if nothing happened. And what is this revealed to us? It happens because there's life in this finger. And what this tells us, what this reveals to us is that even when we have the cut on the finger, the cut was only affected the superficial, the external, the body. It did not affect the life that is in the finger. There's a life force in this finger. And the life force in this finger is not just a general life force. It's a specific life force that this finger is supposed to be like this, is supposed to have this function and this ability to act. And this koyach was there all the time, even while the finger was cut, and it was whole, and because of its wholeness, because of the wholeness of the life that's in the finger, it was able to direct the finger to heal exactly the way it should be. They say that naturally, but actually it takes place physically. There's a physical healing. What is the physical healing? The physical healing is that there are molecules. Every part of tissue is composed of little molecules. And these molecules have the nature that they grow and they split and they can increase and combine and connect to each other. So the molecules connect to each other. And that's how it heals. But the molecules, even if the molecules have the nature of splitting for some reason, but nothing will direct the molecules that it should heal exactly the way, in a smooth way, to put the finger in a perfect shape. They can split and go into every direction that they can go. What makes them go and heal and connect in this perfect way? That is only because there is a neshama, there's a nefesh, there's a life force in this person, in this finger, that directs how, tells the molecules exactly how they should split and how they should connect, and to heal it exactly the way it was before. This manifests, this shows the force of the neshama in action. Normally we don't pay attention to it. We don't, we just go on with our lives. But when you start thinking of what happens in this very simple episode, we begin to recognize, to see, so to speak, the neshama in action. What do we normally see? Normally we see the neshama working, so to speak, only through the finger, through the body. We see the externals, the effects, what the body can do because there is a hidden neshama. But the neshama is hidden. We don't see it functioning, acting on its own. But when the body is damaged, so the body is no longer capable of doing its own thing. The only thing that remains over there is the neshama. You see the neshama actually functioning independently of the body. The body is damaged, it's cut, it's broken, and the neshama causes it to heal. So we almost can, so to speak, look directly on the effects of the presence of the neshama, on the fact that the neshama cannot be damaged and remains whole under all circumstances. This is one example of what's called the hidden world, the Amadis-Kasya, the concealed world. What is it? There is within us, within the world, there is a godly force that maintains the world. This is the real life of the world. But it's concealed. But despite the fact that it's concealed, this is the real force behind everything that's happening. So that in fact, all the abilities that we have, that we're able to do with our body, we say I have strong muscles and I can move my hand and I can do all kinds of different things. The absolute truth is, everybody knows this, that no matter how much you exercise your body, no matter how much strength you have in your muscles, if you do not have the spirit, the neshama power in this hand, you won't be able to do anything. Absolutely nothing. A person can be perfectly healthy physically, perfectly healthy physically, and not have the strength to lift up a cup if he's spiritually dispirited. There is an interesting phenomenon that we experience on a regular basis. Say a person is very tired. Tired to the point where he can't keep his eyes open. He's very tired, and he doesn't have any strength. then he lays down to take a rest. If he rests for 3 hours but doesn't fall asleep, he gets up almost in the same state as he was when he lay down. If he rests for 10 minutes and he falls asleep, he comes up and he's a new person. And he has the strength. And all of a sudden, all his strength came back to him. In other words, we can clearly see that we're not talking about resting up the body. We're talking about resting the soul, resting a spiritual restoration, regaining back the inner strength, not the external strength. We're not always aware of the inner strength. As a matter of fact, normally we rely on the external strength. If you want to, let's say, if you want to learn something, we say, if I repeat this 10 times, it will register in my memory. We don't realize that there is also a koyach haseichel, so to speak, a neshama koyach, that allows us to understand it and to relate to it and to absorb this knowledge, which is much deeper, much greater, and much more effective than the actions of repetition itself. The inyan of Matan Torah, the point of Matan Torah, what has been affected in Matan Torah, is that there was made the possibility of revealing the actual life force that's hidden in the world. So that after Matan Torah it became a different world. After Matan Torah, the world was no longer based on its natural rules and its natural limits, as it was before Matan Torah. The world has acquired a new status, that now, from then on, it is actually sustained directly by a godly presence. And this is why, after Matan Torah, we can do a mitzvah and affect and actually change the physical world. And learn Torah, and through Torah you can change the physical world. Because at Matan Torah, the inner force, the inner neshama, so to speak, the life force of the world, this is what became manifest and revealed. This was essentially the inner for Matan Torah, as we will discuss in the next couple of weeks. So now, at Eden, we're facing the Yam Suf. And the Yam Suf was preventing them, so to speak, was an obstacle in them pursuing their path, in going towards Matan Torah. Hashem said to Moshe that since that their path here now is not just to follow the path of the world, but to go towards Matan Torah, to go to a point where you would be revealing the inner force, the inner life aspect of the world, the hidden world. Therefore, nothing in the natural world can stand in their way. If the sea is in their way, the sea will split. And what is the significance? What is the symbolic, so to speak, the symbol of the sea? It says that the sea is called Almodis Kasu, just like in our world. You have the revealed world is on dry land. Everything in the revealed world, everything on dry land is a separate entity, is revealed as a presence on its own. In the sea, everything is contained within its source of life. Like the fish live in the water, and this is their source of life. They're one thing with the water. They're not a separate entity from the water. Whereas in the dry land, everything is a separate entity. And if you need to eat, so you take food through your means of taking food. And if you have to breathe, there is a breathing process. You take in air, you exhale it, you take in air and exhale it. It's not that you are living in it on a constant basis like the fish live in the water. They're one thing with the water. There is absolutely no distinction. This is called Alma Diskasha, the world where the chayas, the life, and the body that absorbs this life is one. And this is what Moshe was instructed to tell Eden, that on these circumstances, because we are going towards Matan Torah, what they will be discovering now, even though they're standing between Pare and the sea, and from a natural perspective, from a worldly perspective, they are in an impossible situation. They're an impossible situation based on the parameters that they're used to in the natural world. But they are now going to be connected and to be revealing in the world a new depth, a new reality. The life force that's behind the world. And therefore the sea is not going to stand in their way. And they should all have to do is continue on their journey with the same mindset, with the same attitude, with the same clarity with which they left Mitzrayim. When they left Mitzrayim, they went into the desert, and they weren't concerned how they're going to survive in the desert. When Moshe Rabbeinu told them to turn back towards Mitzrayim, they weren't concerned how they're going to turn towards Mitzrayim. With the same mindset, they should continue on the path that they're being led. And they will find a completely new world that they never expected to exist. The point that this translates for us, we speak about it all the time. We come to learn Torah. Besides the vastness, the huge amount that there is to learn, the complexity, how complicated it is. Just to make sense of the words, to learn how to put a Mishnah, the words of the Mishnah together, and to be able to go through it and put the sentences in place and understand the logic and so forth, the simple logic. Then there is tremendous depth to understand the concepts. Even if you understand the logic, but it has to make sense. What is it why is this true? Why is this logical? This is a Torah that's called, this is called Torah's Hashem, Hashem's Torah, and it is Hashem's wisdom. How can a human being approach to even begin to learn Hashem's wisdom? Before we start, it says there's no way I can understand Hashem's wisdom. And how can we live up to the Torah? So for this, we have this, so to speak, the preamble, the introduction. The introduction, Matan Torah, is Kriyas Yamsuf. That just as we have been exposed in the Kriyas Yamsuf, that the very simple world, the natural world, that we were always used to knowing that the dry land is dry land, the sea is a sea. They don't interchange functions. The sea is only the sea, and the dry land is dry land. And they, by Kriyas Yamsuf, we were shown that that's not necessarily true. The world, truly, the natural world has its limits, but the real world, taking into account, so to speak, the highest, the real life force behind the world, over there, the dry land and the sea, they can be interchanged. The sea can become dry land. The same is true, as you pointed out, that in every human being, in all of us, there is the Alma Dies Galia, there is the revealed and the experiential, that part of us, of our thinking that we can experience, the logical abilities that we have, the logic and the functioning abilities of thought, speech, and deed, that is what's called Alma Dies Galia. This is the revealed part of the human being. But behind that, there is a concealed, a hidden part. There is a neshama. And the ability of depth and perception and understanding that there is in the neshama, that we do not begin to even to recognize under normal circumstances. So when we approach learning Torah, when we approach life in general, life is a very challenging path. We start off as children, and then we grow from childhood into adolescence and into adulthood, and we take on responsibility for developing a life and building a family. These are all mind-boggling undertakings. How are we going to do it? And the answer is that what is vested in us, what is contained within us, is not limited by what we are observing. We are observing the functioning, the externals of the human being, the functional part of the human being. But behind that, there is a neshama. And the depth that's in the neshama is unfathomable, is unlimited. What happens? Just like at the Kriyas Yamsuf. Even when approaching the Yamsuf was flowing in full force. But if they pursue it, and they continue on their path, going in the direction that they were told to go, then they will find that the Yamsuf itself will split. They will find that the hidden part of the world will become revealed. This is what happens in every human being. We have to pursue our path. We sit and learn. It seems to us that we are doing on Sunday the same thing, and on Monday the same thing we did on Sunday, and on Tuesday the same thing we did on Monday. We seem to be learning basically the same thing. But in reality, it's not the same thing at all. Because every time that we approach this learning, and every time that we understand and we learn a posik in Torah, or a Mishnah, or in Gemara, or in Chassidus, we learn it again, we understand this, then we understand a little more. It's not just we have a quantitative. What quantitative means? An amount, more of the same thing. It's not just more of the same thing. What happens is that a new insight, a new resource, a new flow of life is revealed in the person. And this is exactly what happens. Anybody who pursues a path of learning and davening and Avodas Hashem, so at first it seems, how am I ever going to be able to do this? How am I going to be able to approach this? This is beyond, I've never experienced this, this is totally strange to me, and so forth. And after a few months, he turns around and says, You mean I did not know this 3 months ago? I couldn't understand it. Why not? This is so simple. This is so obvious. This is so true. I relate to it perfectly. I can't even see how somebody cannot understand it. What happened? What happened is that a new perspective, a new vista, a new view, a new source of life is revealed in the person as he pursues the path. As long as he continues to pursue the path, especially if he is in a bind, especially if power is on one side and the sea on the other side, and he is now stuck in the middle, and he is a total loss of what to do. And under these circumstances, he says, regardless of what the situation appears to me, I know that I'm here because Hashem brought me here. And therefore there is definitely, I'm not even concerned how, there's definitely the depth and the reality that exists, that is going to guide me in the path, in the way I should go. And he persists and continues, doesn't jump into the sea, he doesn't give up, go back to Pare, like we said, the 4 different opinions, give up, or jump into the sea, or go fight, just pursues the path that he has to pursue, continues. He is stuck in learning, and he cannot break through this. And he continues and does it again and again and again. And then he finds, all of a sudden, the sea opens up. All of a sudden, the sea opens up. And he is able to understand that which yesterday he couldn't even begin to imagine that it existed. All of a sudden, things begin to make sense. And how come it makes sense? Because, as we said, because of the depth, the hidden part of the person. The depth of life, the depth of the neshama that is contained in every person. And the only way to reveal it is by this pursuing it and stubbornly continue to go towards Matan Torah. And knowing that if I don't understand, there is nevertheless a real life behind the surface. Because ultimately, what happens at Matan Torah, what happens to a Yidden through learning Torah, ultimately is that he actually begins to understand things not on the basis of worldly logic, but on the basis of Torah logic, of godly logic. Things that the world cannot really relate to, he begins to understand and see, hey, this is a godly concept. There's a different reality. This is the process of Kriyas Yamsuf. And this is why Hashem told Moshe that all 4 of these different approaches that he came up with are all wrong. Not because they're wrong in themselves. There's one principle wrong in them. And the principle wrong is that they thought that the solution lies in some kind of a worldly logic, a worldly solution. But there is a completely different dimension that exists. And the need for Matan Torah is to bring the godly dimension into our lives, into the world. And this is in fact, this is the union of learning Torah today, is to bring the godly dimension into our lives. Not just to be limited, so to speak, in the world dimension. Things have to be made sense. Making sense means making sense in a logical, in a worldly logic. There is capacity within us, in our mind, in our soul, to understand a godly concept. And this is essentially what we're learning in Pnimis HaTorah and Chassidus. Essentially, this is what Chassidus explains, that even though there's a big world, there's so many things in the world, but really it's all one thing. Hashem Echad. How do you understand that? How can you make sense of it, so to speak, in worldly logic? No way. And yet we have the capability of perceiving this and understanding this. So this is the, so to speak, this is the teaching from Kriyas Yamsuf, from that episode, that moment before Kriyas Yamsuf. And this is why, in fact, the Rebbe maneuvered it in such a way, so that this aspect should be revealed, and Eden should come face to face with the recognition that we are not to seek answers within the limits of worldly logic. We have to know that the real answer lies deeper inside, in the soul and the life of the person. Just like if you have a cut in your finger, that's not the end of the world at all, because the life force behind that is still there, and it's never damaged. So with this approach, we're all going to be able to successfully cross the Yamsuf. We're all going to be Makabel the Torah, and all are going to fulfill, so to speak, our individual and combined mission in life, and with Neighbor Shazur bring Mashiach.
Amen.